Hey guys, this is So Approachable,
the podcast for social misfits who've always wanted to be a part of a book club.
But perhaps you've been overlooked in the real world, or you're just too busy. We get it.
This is your invitation. You're in good company. Let's get into it. This week we're doing Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I'm Sarah Lyles.
And I'm Jamie Livingston, and we are So Approachable. And this is a good one. This is my book pick. I'm excited. Hopefully you went back and listened to the other episodes, got all the background that you needed. If you're like Sarah and have never read it, hopefully that was helpful. I would love to know if it actually was helpful. Maybe you'll be able to tell us in this episode if it helped along the journey for you.
Well, first, let me say happy birthday. This launches right around your birthday.
Thank you.
And so this was your pick, as we learned in the TLDR. But, man, can I just say, you might have taken me to the dark side.
Woo! That's right.
The other episode was really helpful, especially for someone that had never read any of the books, had never understood any of the characters. I will say, though, after reading it, if you are not going to read any of the books and you have not, you still can read this book and it can be a really enjoyable book. So don't feel overwhelmed going to this book saying, man, I have to read all these books to get...
A whole trilogy.
Yes. And so getting to that and understanding is really, really helpful to go, it alone by itself is really enjoyable.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I tried to read it with that critical eye, too. Like, could this stand alone? Would it help to know all the information? Absolutely. But I think it is still a great story on its own.
Right. And I think, maybe, just maybe, I will go back and read all three of them. But even if I didn't, I walked away with understanding the book, understanding the characters, and knowing what was going on.
You know, in all your spare time, you're going to go read those other three books.
Yes.
So I do want to say that this novel became an instant bestseller, sold over 1.5 million copies in the first week.
And you were there.
I was there. I was one of them. Right here. And it was the biggest debut for any book in the Hunger Games series.
Wow. I wonder why. I wonder what about this year and this book made it so interesting. I had talked to, and now you got me on the trend of asking people who were really into the series, like, why did this book stand out to you more than any of the others? And a lot of them said, kind of across the board, they wanted to understand Haymitch's story.
Yeah. So as you're saying that, my brain is going, I'm going to guess it's because all of us college-age students, high schoolers who maybe checked it out from the library before are now old enough to just go to the store and buy the book, which I was thinking about it. And this is one of the only book series that I own. I am a diehard library person. I think buying books is kind of silly because I will literally read it once and then never touch it again. So I think spending money on books is very silly. So the fact that I own this series is a testament to how much I enjoy it.
Yeah, you must really love it. And that's why we're doing it for your birthday.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it too. I do want to point out that the movie for this one is supposed to be coming out in November of 2026. So Thanksgiving weekend, that kind of thing.
Is that kind of her trend to kind of follow?
They all came out for the big November release.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. It makes sense if that's what she's always done, that she would continue to do that.
I'm just so excited, and I think this is really cool. And Haymitch is an interesting character in the books. He's definitely not a main character, really. You think Katniss and Beetee are your main characters. So Haymitch we meet a lot, and we kind of know his story going into this, but there's so much we didn't know. And we found out along the way in this one.
Well, I don't know Katniss or Beetee except for the one movie. Mm-hmm. And so to me, Haymitch is so much more important than all of them after reading this book.
Yeah. So the story takes place or places a thematic emphasis on rebellion, the power of propaganda, the pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of love and friendship.
That's a great explanation.
I would think so.
Really seriously put that and say, wow, okay, all of that makes sense.
So as somebody who has read this book, my jaw hit the floor in the first chapter. Like, I remember I was sitting in the car, I was in the passenger seat, and I just, like, was looking at my book and, like, what did I just read? I was questioning what was happening. So the first chapter is the reaping. Mm-hmm. We wake up, we find out that Haymitch's birthday is reaping day.
Which, we talked about, it's July 4th, which is Independence Day for America, which, Suzanne Collins knew what she was doing.
Right. I think that's very interesting that Panem is kind of the ruins of the United States. And so now instead of Independence Day, it's Reaping Day. That is just speaks volumes in and of itself. Mm-hmm. So we meet Haymitch, and we know that he's the one that's going to get picked. Mm-hmm. And so I'm reading, and they said the first two girls' names, and then they said the first two boys' names, and he wasn't in them.
Well, see, and for someone like me who I didn't know the backstory, I didn't actually even think that his name wouldn't have gotten picked because I didn't know, and he was one of the ones that wasn't, except for because of our bonus episode, I didn't know that. Going, okay, so, all right, there's got to be something a little bit different. But when that happened, that whole unfolding, I was like, wow, that was so wonderfully written. Like, the way she did it was very, pulled you in.
It definitely pulled me in. I was then glued to the next several chapters because I was so confused. Like I said, the names were being called, and I was like, well, I know it's him. They called the first boy, and then they went to call the second boy, and it was a different name. And I was like, well, wait. Well, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe this isn't, they're going to flash forward to next year or something when his name does get drawn. And so for him to then be drawn into the games illegally, illegitimately,
yes.
I was, screaming. It was one of those where I don't have strong reactions to books, and I almost threw the book. What just happened?
Well, and someone who enjoys reality TV, it's kind of my guilty pleasure. I was like, wow, there's kind of a sense of reality TV in this. They are shooting it, and they've got this small amount of time that they're not having to televise it. And I'm like, okay, this is even more interesting that we're now placing him there like it never even happened.
Right. Well, and as a broadcaster, I totally understand that because there's always a delay in TV. It's normally 7 seconds. If you didn't know that, in live TV, there's always a 7-second buffer, and that's how they're able to bleep things out. And if they need to dump out, something really bad is happening and they'll go to black, it's always a 7-second delay. So the fact that they had a 5-minute delay, I thought was really interesting.
7 seconds is nothing.
It's enough to go and push the button when somebody drops an F-bomb so that it's bleeped out. That's it.
It makes sense.
But so you don't have 5 minutes to go and rewrite history.
She rewrote history never even happened.
Well, and that's why I thought it was interesting watching Haymitch watch back the video. What was actually broadcast to the people, and his reaction was well, that's not what happened at all.
Yeah.
And that's where, from the original trilogy, we know that he was selected, but we know nothing about this illegitimate thing. The fact that the first tribute selected was killed.
Ugh, I know.
And then they just needed to drag somebody else into it, and he unfortunately made his presence known, trying to save his girlfriend.
Trying to be a hero.
Right.
And then he got selected. And then it almost made me mad. How horrible. He thought he escaped it. His parents were probably or his mom was probably oh, thank goodness. And then for them to do that, could you imagine?
Well, and I also questioned, couldn't they just have put their hand in the ball and grabbed another name out?
Yes.
Why wouldn't they have just done that live? Oh, well, we're going to take this person.
Well, she obviously had some out for him. Oh, nope, you're not going to go against us. You're not going to be the hero. I'm going to show you who's boss in this.
Well, and it's interesting because in that moment, Plutarch Heavensbee wants to keep Lenore Dove alive because the lady who's drawing the names was just shoot her and get her out of here. Because he was trying to save her. But he's like, no, I need her for this video for the reality TV aspect of it. And so Haymitch hears that and is aware that they basically are planning on killing her as well. But Plutarch ends up saving her. What did you think? Maybe we can talk about Plutarch a little, because he's an interesting character, and I'm curious from your perspective, do you think he's a good guy or a bad guy, or how, like, his story is kind of interesting in here.
It is. So at the beginning, I thought he was just one of them, like one of the capitals, like just working for them, trying to cover this live good scene, trying to get really good media, trying to be like, let's make this story even bigger than what it was, trying to elevate District 12 to make people notice them. And then as his story unfolded more, I liked him more. I felt like he did try to be good, but at points I was like, I don't love you. I'm not super impressed with you because you really aren't that great.
Right. So he is part of the rebellion.
Yes.
And so we learned that, but I feel like he does a really bad job of it. Because we meet him in the trilogy. He is a character in the books, and he is actually the head game maker at that point. And so it's like he started as a videographer out in District 12 and worked his way up to be the person in charge of the games. And so he's kind of played his role and he's playing small ball or long ball. Like, he's playing the long game here and is trying to kind of be the inside man to break the machine. And so it's interesting that so much time has passed. We get up to Katniss's games, and he still hasn't been able to accomplish his mission of breaking the games.
And see, to me, like, if you're really that great, you could have done that.
Well, and I feel like they got close to, like, breaking the arena. Well, I mean, that was his mission.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Right.
Like, what happened in the next 24 years? Like, how close did they get in these other years? Well, that's where I want a book every year.
That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, I can see in this why he wasn't successful, right? But not reading the other books, I don't have that information or knowledge to say, like, okay, come on, you could have, in 25 years, 24 years, you could have done something.
Well, right. And as head game maker, like, he's still responsible for doing really bad, atrocious things. But underlying, he's trying to subvert the situation. So there's definitely a love-hate relationship with this guy. And I understand where Haymitch is, like, wary.
Yeah,
like,
of
he's
course.
Definitely a morally gray character.
I wouldn't trust him. I would not trust him if I was Haymitch whatsoever. I would think he always wants something. He's always needing something in every area. Even though he looks like he's trying to help him, I'd be like, what do you want? The constant side eye, like, what are you up to?
Yes, absolutely. So he's selected as the tribute. What other questions or comments do you have from just the very beginning of that whole selection process?
Well, I did appreciate on page 17, again, coming from someone who's never read any of the trilogy, where they had talked about the giant screens flanking the stage. Because in my mind, I wasn't envisioning, even though I saw the movie, it's hard to know whether it's movie or book, right? Because there's so many differences. So they showed it on live screen TVs, and they talked about how it was 50-some years ago, the district rose up against our capital's oppression, kicking off a bloody civil war in panel. We lost, and in punishment, every 4th of July, each of the districts routinely has to send 2 tributes, 1 girl and 1 boy between the ages of 12 and 18, to fight to the death in their arena. That helped my understanding so much that I was like, okay, now I understand why they do it, what's the criteria, and then also it tells you the last victor gets crowned. So I'm like, they literally are fighting against one another. Whoever dies, which is all of them but one, knowing that, I mean, basically your chances of survival are like 0.
Right. 1 in 24 or 1 in 48 this year.
Yes.
So not very cool, but very helpful for somebody who hasn't read any of the books.
Very helpful.
It does stand alone. You don't need all of the background, but yeah, I think it did set a good stage for the drama and the actual conflict in this book.
Yes. And that's why I say, like, even knowing the information that you gave us in the bonus episode, I could have read this without knowing any of that because she does a great job at bringing it so quickly to understand it and go, okay, so they're having this, there's who these people are. She introduces people quickly, which that was really hard for me understanding who they were because I was like, this person must be important, but I don't know anything, but they're going with them. Like Effie, like I was like, oh, she must be someone of importance, but all I see is that she's just like with them as like an escort, you know?
There were a lot of name drops, and I don't think that it necessarily mattered if you didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
But for the hardcore fans, it was really nice to see familiar names. Like, in the trilogy, we never learn Katniss's parents' names. Oh. We never actually meet them. And so the fact that Haymitch was friends with both of Katniss's mom and dad as a child, that was news. Like, Haymitch kept really quiet in the original books.
Right.
And so we don't know anything about him. And he never said, like, oh, yeah, I knew your pa.
Right.
And they were best friends. And so when those names came up, and it was really the last names because they just dropped it in there and they were like, oh, Burdick Everdeen. And I was like, that's Katniss Everdeen's parent.
That would not have stuck out to me.
Well, and I didn't recognize her mom's name at all, Astrid March. Like, that didn't make sense, but it was the apothecary girl that Burdick was into. And so that made that match. And she was friends with the twins, who then the one twin ends up being the tribute as well. So, like, there's so many of these things. We also met Peeta's dad. He was in the reaping scene as well. And, like, they just mention, and you hear the last name, you hear Malark, and go, oh, that's a relative of Peeta. So it was really cool to hear those names, and it was kind of like a warm, cozy blanket of like, oh, I'm learning so much more about these people.
But again, I think what's cool is it doesn't
take away.
Right, it doesn't. But for people that are super fans, as I'll call you, you guys were like, awesome, that's great information, like backstory that you would probably want to know and not have known otherwise. But for me, I was like, okay, they're just another person in a character. And so it wasn't significant to where it mattered, but I could see why it would be exciting.
Yeah. What did you think about his girlfriend, Lenore Dove?
Wow, I have so many thoughts.
Oh, okay.
Well, I loved her dedication to him. I loved how much she cared. I loved her, like, nature, like, almost like a hippie. I guess I envisioned her, like, live with the world and nature. That's how I envisioned her living overall. I loved how she cared about him. And I felt like she cared about him. I felt like she really did a poor job in some areas. Because I also questioned some, like, but why would you let them pick his name and I mean, I know that she would have been killed. I know that she was trying to stand up for him. I don't know. There was part of me that loved her, but part of me didn't love her. And so it was like,
She was an interesting character because she was very defiant or very rebellious.
Yes.
And Haymitch was like, I'm not all about that. Like, I'm not interested. I don't like what the Capitol's doing, but I can't do anything about it. And that was one of the things that she specifically said. Like, it's not inevitable. It's not that every year when you wake up on your birthday, it's going to be reaping day. And he's like, yes, it is. Like, that's what's going to happen. She's like, but it will always be that way unless people start thinking that there could be change, which I actually thought was interesting because that was the exact same conversation that Katniss has with Gale in the first book before the reaping. He suggests that they run away and could exist and survive in the wild. And she's like, but we can't leave our family and nothing's ever going to change. So why would we do that? Like, that's pointless. And so there were a lot of similarities between those two stories, but then also the story of President Snow and Lucy Gray Baird.
Oh, yes. I actually loved that. I love that story because it gave me a good insight into him, a little bit of a soft spot, but also kind of why he's angry. So it's like, I see more into him. And I'm sure there's probably going to be a book about him in there somewhere. If not, she's maybe thinking about it. But understanding, like, there's got to be a reason why all these people are so upset and doing all these horrible things. There's got to be deeper. That's how I felt with him. Like, oh, he loved her, and look what happened.
Which person are you talking about?
You talking about President Snow and your...
Yeah.
Okay.
That is the book. That's the that's the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That's the first prequel.
See? That's why I don't know any of these books.
So the first prequel is about President Snow.
See, don't know.
We talked about that. We talked about that.
Okay, so seriously, but really, I don't... And again, because I read that, I was like, oh, I'd really be interested. And now I want to go read that book.
Right. And that is what is fascinating about that. You're going to go back and listen to the other episode and be like, oh, that's right.
Now that you're saying
because he's a mentor and has to help her.
I remember, actually, because there's what on the front of the, what was that? So this is significant.
Yes.
But then that book had something on the front of it that was significant.
Probably a snake of some sort.
Mm-hmm. And that they referenced to whatever...
The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I feel like it's probably similar to that one. I don't actually own that one.
Well, it's okay. I'm sure you read it.
I did. And watched the movie. It was great.
And I'm sure it was great. And so for me to have that understanding of his heart and how he felt was like, oh, wow.
And I did think it was interesting that Haymitch ends up talking with President Snow early on. And the conversation that he has about talking about his girlfriend and like, oh, yeah, well, she seems to love you, but doesn't ever include you in her plans. Or like, it was kind of this eerie, ominous speech. And it kind of gave me the creeps.
Well, see, and I looked at it like it was something personal. Like he was giving like, this is what I went through. You think she loves you, but she doesn't really love you. You think she's there for you, but she's not really there for you. And so I looked at it as him saying what he's been through, giving it back to him. And yes, it was all dark and ominous, but I mean, his story.
So another thing that was curious to me was when Haymitch and the other tributes are taken to the Capitol on the train, they were like shoved into cages practically.
I know.
And in the trilogy, they're treated to like the fine, classiest, fanciest train and tons of food. And it's like a celebrity status at that point. So it shows how the games have changed along the way into this reality TV. And like you really are getting star treatment for like the 2 weeks that you're remaining alive.
Wow, it's their last supper. I mean, really, that whole thing, to watch how they gave him his birthday cake and how they even tried to make that up. It was like, come on, you're literally sending him to his death. Why does he want any of this? I would probably have taken the cake and shoved it in their faces. And the fact that he didn't, I was like, well, okay, he's got strength.
Right. It's just so fascinating, especially with the four of them. And I think that's one of the questions. I have a ton of questions to ask you. But it talks about the alliances made between the tributes in this season and this games, because they don't typically make that big of alliances. The careers, the really strong, big guys, always bind together. And there's specific groups that come together, but the fact that the newcomers joined together had never happened, and I don't think happened again. But did that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I looked at it as the newcomers knew that if they didn't band together, they would never win against the careers, that they had no physical strength to get there. I mean, in my envisioning, I imagined some giant, bulky guy that had been training forever to just go and kill. That was his job. And that's all he's done. Where these other newcomers they lived a life to where they had to help on the farm. They had to help wherever they were. They worked a living to help their family where whatever they were doing. If their name was chosen, their destiny was to die to the careers. And so in my thoughts reading this was like, the newcomers know we need to align together to get the careers out. I don't understand the thinking of, okay, well, at the very end, one of us is left, so we're going to then have to kill each other. That was gruesome.
Well, and a lot of the alliances would last for a certain amount of time, and then they would decide, like, we're going to go our separate ways so that we don't have to end up killing each other. And that happened throughout all of the books, really. But with this, with such a large group of people coming together, I mean, there was kind of a bigger plan underneath it all. What did you think about Haymitch running in the other direction and not really taking part in the alliance after building it?
Well, I would say I did feel like he was on a mission. He had one mission, one goal was to stop this. He didn't want this to continue to happen. He had one goal to flood what was it? I can't even remember the word they used.
The arena.
The arena, yes. The computers. And
the brain.
The brain. And so in his mind, that's all he wanted to do. But also on the emotional side, you literally left them to die. And so that part of me was like, what? You couldn't even have helped them, take someone with you. You just left them, let them die. But okay, go after this mission.
I have a list of things that surprised me along the way. And I don't know if these things would have surprised you as much as they surprised me. But Luella was one of the District 12 tributes, and she died in the opening parade. That was another moment where I screamed while reading. It's like, wait, what? What are they going to do? Are they going to replace this person? How are they going to manage this for TV?
Right.
How are they going to fix this?
Right.
So when they throw in a body double, which is just some other random child that has been made to look like this little girl, I was dumbfounded.
I'm going to back up just a minute. When he took the body in front of President Snow, I was like, okay,
dang.
Wow. Seriously, good for him. And all the things that happened along that whole journey for him to get there I kind of was like, well, I have a little bit of a good job, Haymitch.
Well, and that was also where they altered the video to not show any of that. And so nobody in any of the districts would have seen that. But he was doing it to be seen.
Yes.
And to not let this girl's death go in vain.
Right.
And then they pull in this unfortunate little girl who's drugged up, doesn't know anything. Just, they called her a mockingjay, or basically calling her a spy because somebody's paying attention to her and she's kind of relaying the messages back and forth. I don't know, it kind of alluded to the mockingjays that we learn more about in the trilogy, and I just felt so sad for this little LuLu.
I felt so sad. You could tell they were talking about in her ear. There was that way that they could talk to her, and how she constantly was tugging at her ear, like it was hurting. And then you saw that she was drugged up. I mean, it literally made me think of a scene of Taken, to where she is taken to do a job and they don't care about her state, and she's doing what they're doing, and it was heart-wrenching.
Yep. So the next thing was the careers versus the newcomers. That surprised me because Haymitch kind of felt like an outsider to begin with. So the fact that they all teamed up was pretty cool. The other thing was Wyatt's death. That one came really fast. I was surprised because that was in the bloodbath, I believe. So, I don't know. For some reason, I was really rooting for District 12, and so I thought all four of them would at least survive the bloodbath. If not LuLu.
I can't believe
LuLu survived.
I don't know how LuLu survived. I honestly was surprised that she survived. I was like, okay, maybe she was just too drugged up and ditzy at that point. And to see that the way they unfolded her to come back, I was like, what?
Yeah. What did you think about the arena itself?
Wow. I mean, I love that he said it was beautiful, and it was just I think they referenced it, and I think Haymitch referenced how the beauty of it. I mean, I think that he kind of talked about how it just looked so gorgeous, and then to find out a lot of it was poisonous was wow. And is that a common thing in the arenas?
Yes, to a certain extent. I don't think they're supposed to be friendly environments.
Right.
So there are wildlife and things that will kill you. I mean, Katniss gets hit by flaming balls. Like there's a lot of things that are in there. The mutts. Like there's a lot of booby traps and things that will come at you. But the fact that it was this, it reminded me of the Wizard of Oz and like the poppy fields that would like put you to sleep. I mean, the flowers literally killed Luella, LuLu. So that was interesting. So I'm sure that there was kind of like that. I was envisioning this scent coming off of everything and then fogging up their senses.
Oh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
I think Haymitch referenced that maybe it was when he was watching the games afterward that the arena itself looked like an eye. And that the Capitol is always watching. And then he had the phrase, like, I don't know if they realize we're always watching the Capitol as well. And there's kind of this, like, ominous, rebellious undertone there. But I thought it was really interesting that the Capitol, or that the arena was shaped like an eye.
See, and again, you know how I tell you I envision these things, like, I immediately went to Las Vegas, that big dome.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking of it when, you know, because they have put an eye on there before. And I was like, yep, that's why I envision it immediately.
Did you see the volcano coming?
No, I did not. And really, I was like, wait, did Haymitch do that? Like,
Right.
you know, and then part of me was like, what happened? Did Haymitch set that off? And then that happened. And I was like, wow, like that killed a lot of people.
Well, and that really caught me by surprise. Although I feel like a volcano is mentioned in the trilogy somewhere along the way. I did not realize it was in Haymitch's year, but very fascinating because why would they even think of it being a volcano? I mean, like, the U.S. doesn't have a whole lot of active volcanoes. I mean, we got Mount St. Helens. That was a big deal. There's another one up in Alaska. But Hawaii, nothing on the mainland. So, like, these hicks from West Virginia are not going to know what a volcano is.
True. But for me, all this is man-made. And so I'm thinking in my head, they're going through what can we take that's man-made that can do big things in a quick amount of time, and a volcano would do that.
Well, and that is very theatrical.
And it looks good on camera, I'm sure.
Well, and what did Maisily say happened with the lava? Like, because it wasn't burning them.
No.
It was like...
it wasn't even hot, I feel like.
Right, I feel like it was kind of like an electrified something.
It wasn't traditional, like what you would envision of, like, and then they talked about the ash or the smoke, pretty much that being the main thing that killed a lot of them. And so it made me go, there must have been something in that ash or smoke that, like you were saying, that scent that it was giving off, it kind of gave it to where that, or it killed them.
Yeah, Volcano was very surprising to me for fun things that could happen in the arena. What did you think about him making it under the arena and actually being able to set off the charges?
I was like hoping. I was hoping. I was very hopeful. But then also knowing there was books, like, okay, I don't know. I started the book with going, I know he's not going to succeed. I knew that. And maybe that was just me going, all right, this is how many years ago. This is a prequel. Going, he's not going to succeed. He's not going to get there. But the fact that he actually got down the ladder, got down there, set off this bomb, and then it did what? Nothing.
Right. That's where I was very confused. It's like he was successful. He did what he set out to do.
Well, then it makes me question, all right, Plutarch, did you really know what you were talking about?
Right. Like, because that's when the volcano went off, right? Like so maybe the volcano went off too early. Like, they were planning on doing it after several days, and the glitching of everything caused that to fire off too soon. I considered that, but I don't know. I just felt like the whole bomb thing was anticlimactic.
Yes, I expected more. Like, okay, they got him. He almost didn't make it. All right, got it. But I knew he was going to make it. He's running for there. And then I thought, there's got to be something. And then it was like, wah, wah.
Right. But I feel like that's important because that needed to be what Haymitch was feeling. Because he's like, I did it. And then the extreme letdown of why.
Well, and I almost felt like he would feel if I was there. Like, did I just set off that volcano? Like, did I just make the reverse happen of what I thought was going to happen? Mm-hmm. And now all these people died because I did something that I thought was going to be great, but it wasn't. I mean, there was all that in my mind.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that he would be questioning in that moment. And I think that it was right around that time that Ampert dies, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Because Ampert was supposed to be kind of keeping watch or something. And when Haymitch comes back, he's being eaten by carnivorous squirrels.
I mean, the whole mutt thing. Let's go there for just a moment, because they stood out so much to me. And the fact that they were able to be targeted specific to mm-hmm. what they were doing. I mean, there was the porcupine, the squirrels. I mean, there was birds. Yes. All of those were like...
ladybugs.
Oh, the ladybugs. Whoa. Oh, my goodness. That literally... I just was shivers down my spine as I was thinking about those.
I was like physically plucking them off of myself while reading. Like, oh, I'm itchy. Get them off.
I mean, I imagine them being like ticks, mm-hmm.
but way worse.
Way worse. And so... the whole mutt thing. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about the mutts?
There were a lot of them, and they were aggressive in this one. I think in Hunger Games, there are mutts, and they talk about them, but they're not unleashed until the very end, and those were very interesting ones, and it was these big wolves that were kind of manifestations of the tributes who had died, and they came and attacked the last 3 or 4 tributes. And so we didn't get a ton of them throughout that entire games. And so the fact that they were being unleashed left and right in this one, I was like, oh my goodness.
So I don't have any of that back history to think there was anything different. I just looked at it like, these mutts are scarier than the humans coming at me with their swords.
Yeah, I thought it was really unfair that it wasn't the tributes actually fighting. Like, they were killing people off, like they were picking. So why didn't they pick this person sooner? Like, they were selecting the winner of the games by these mutts if they were that targeted. Although the squirrels one was just really, really sad because mm-hmm. it was targeted and it was really punishment or significant for Beetee. And we meet Beetee in the trilogy. And so I know you had said that was one of the names where you thought it might be a little more significant if you knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he was a victor, and having your kid entered in the games, heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. Having to mentor your own kid through the games, knowing that he's a 12-year-old who's going to die.
Right.
Awful.
Well, and he does mention that in the book some. Mm-hmm. So it is mentioned in there. So I did get that history of, okay, he knew he was sending his son to die. And so even if his son was doing well at killing others, he knew that the Capitol was going to kill him.
Yeah. But we do meet Beetee in the second book, in Catching Fire. He's one of the victors that's thrown back into the arena with Katniss and Beetee for the second time. And so we do become his friend, and we learn a little bit more about him, and he's like this sciencey, nerdy guy and can make all these sweet inventions. And so he does end up living a lot longer, and we see him beyond this, but I can see why he would have an axe to grind against the Capitol.
Right.
Like, having to watch your son be mauled to death, literally just bones left after just a couple minutes. Like, that, I felt very icky reading that.
It was really horrible. I can't imagine seeing that back on like the TV, like, because I'm sure they televised that because that was good for TV. And so I'm like, that is so sad. And they wanted to make sure Beetee saw it.
Right. And
so I was really saddened by that. I think in there, do you remember when there was like that venue where they were learning all those things? So Beetee does do something that he's like showing all of them. And so you can start to see some of Beetee's skills. And so right there, he starts to show like what he's good at.
Well, and you learn that he won his games by kind of outsmarting the system with electronics and that kind of stuff. So that is really cool that we see that throughout the entire series. So it was really nice to kind of be introduced to him because he's more of like a grandpa figure in the 75th Hunger Games because he is so much older at that point. So it was nice to see his origin. Same thing with Mags. So Mags was one of the mentors for these guys because they didn't have a winner from District 12. And so Mags, I think, was District 4, and then Wirus was District 3. And so those were the two that were guiding Haymitch and the other District 12s. But Mags is the really sweet old lady in Catching Fire who ends up sacrificing herself for the others. And, like, you just meet her, and she's this sweet old lady. Like, I didn't go back and check, but I'm picturing 70 or 80-year-old woman who has to go back into the Hunger Games, and she was just this sweetie.
So she's like 50s in Sunrise on the Reaping.
Probably. Could be, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I should go back and check that. But honestly, in the movies, she's this really sweet old lady, like white hair, picture her like Betty White, like just so kind. And it was interesting to see her in here as the mentor and being kind of a caring person.
Yeah, I felt like she was caring. I felt like she was kind, even though she didn't have to be. And to root for another district doesn't seem to be common.
Right.
And so I felt that she didn't care about that, and that she really was just like, let me mentor you, let me help you however I can.
So you also mentioned Effie Trinket, and Effie ends up coming into this mix as kind of a backup. She's a relative, an older sister of one of the prep team, because their stylist sucks and is just the worst. And you learn that District 12 historically has an awful stylist in the Hunger Games, and that they're always put in these really dumb uniforms, and it just is awful. And so Haymitch having to wear what they wore fits the story that we've been told, and why it's so different in Hunger Games when Katniss and Beetee are in this like flaming suit and are so dazzling and amazing. But Effie came in to the rescue with her old uncle and aunt's clothes and helped them be presentable. So the Drusilla and Magno characters, we weren't supposed to like them. We didn't like them, but it was really cool to see how Effie kind of stepped her foot in while they kicked Drusilla out. Because Effie is the person that we iconically hear, and may the odds be ever in your favor. And with a big pink wig,
right.
Like that's the person. And so she takes over from Haymitch's day on out. And so you can kind of get a little more of the relationship between Haymitch and Effie and how they kind of go back and forth. He respects her, but also hates her. It's a very interesting relationship, but it does give a little more depth to the trilogy. And when we see Effie, because she makes really dumb statements and is all for the Capitol, but every once in a while she says something like, but you're people too. And then she's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. It's an interesting character.
I didn't like Drusilla. Didn't like her. She's, a laughing stock in my opinion. The outfits she wore, the things that she did. I'm like, when she walked out with like cake icing on her mat, like base from the train, I'm like, yeah, no thank you.
Right. I don't think we were supposed to like them. We didn't like them. So that's fun.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we're in the games. We've talked about the mutts. What else surprised you or annoyed you or you just didn't understand? Sarah came prepared with a stack of about 12 papers. She took notes throughout the whole book and was like, Jamie, what on earth does this mean?
I felt confused for so much of it, only because I was like, is this supposed to make sense to me? Is this person supposed to make sense to me? Is this person supposed to be important? And so I took really good notes because I was like, I need to like write this down because I might need to go back to this to understand what this means. But I will say, like, after finishing it, once I finished it, I was like, oh, I actually don't need any of my notes because I understood it. Like, I understood. She did a really good job of closing it to where she took all the pieces of the puzzle and all the ones that were missing in the middle, she put it in like, okay, this is how this works. This is how this goes. And this is how it ends. And ended very sadly. But there were so many surprises. The fact of how, like, okay, let's talk about the hedge, how he got through the hedge. Okay, that was like a cool moment for me. Like, I didn't understand how ladybugs didn't bother him the first time.
Right. Well, I don't think he tried chopping through the hedge because it was a maze. And so he was going through the path. And so it was the second time where he was like, nope, we're just cutting straight through it. And so that was their cue to attack, I think.
That or the mutts were turned off.
Right. It could be.
Who knows? And so, like, that whole thing also made me go, how big is this arena? This thing is huge because he has been walking, in my mind, I don't even know how long it was. It was like days, and he hasn't even hit the end. And so for him to finally get to that edge, when he finally got through the hedge, after a whole lot of sadness happened, I was like, wow.
What did you think about the force field? We're going to like the very end here. The force field and how that ends up being used to his advantage. Because I knew that was coming. That's something that we learned in Catching Fire, was that he was able to use the force field against the last remaining person. So she chucks the axe at him, he ducks, it goes over the cliff, hits the force field, comes back up and whacks her like
and
right
he
in
knew
the
that
head.
was going to happen because he had already kind of attempted, and that happened. So I thought that was so cool.
Did you see it coming?
Oh, no. Oh, no. That was a huge surprise to me because I didn't even think that. I knew he was smart. I knew he had thought so many things out. I know that he was trying all these different areas to try to get to the Capitol and get to the arena and get rid of the reaping. But then when that happened, I was like, wow, that was so cool. Like, that was great.
Well, and it was like outsmarting the system.
Oh, yes.
And that was one of the things that I had read, was that his winning kind of went down in history as a note of rebellion because he didn't do the final killing. He did not physically go and slay the last person. And so that was kind of like his last, like, flipping the bird to the Capitol. It was like, I'm not your pawn. I'm not doing this. Like, you killed the last person. Like, maybe you're the winner.
Well, and I really did like that he used that. I mean, and ultimately, I don't think he wanted to kill anybody. Like, I did feel a sense of, like, he knows that that is ultimately what's going to have to happen. Because ultimately, he's going to either be killed or he's going to kill. And so he had to somehow work it to his advantage. Otherwise, he was a goner.
So he also, like, combines and puts together one final bomb and kind of throws that over the edge at the last second as well. So I was surprised at that, and I didn't know what the result of that bomb was. Did it completely disable the arena, and did he actually accomplish his mission a second time? And I didn't realize that he was so badly injured, because in that last fight, she basically sliced open his guts, like falling out. And so it was just like, which one would have a slower death at that point?
Yes.
But the fact that the axe came back and got her made it a little faster. So then he has to spend time in recovery as they're like doing surgery and putting everything back on the inside and to parade him around. And then when they do parade him around, it's normally this big celebratory thing, and instead he's in a cage.
I know. It was almost like, to me, like I would imagine like a cage lion. Here's our victor, but watch him from the closed gates. Like, you can't come close. Like, he's dangerous.
Right. Well, and he's not allowed to celebrate.
Yeah.
Like, he's trapped in this for the rest of his life of having gone through this trauma and is really not ever going to see the spoils of it.
Yeah. And so I felt really sad for his whole moments when he was eventually out of there into like what I imagined being like a bunker. Like, and so he's back inside of that as he's healing for so long, all alone. He's been through horrible things, and here he is stuck in this moment, getting little bits of food and trying to survive. And then finally they come and do all these things, and I'm like, oh.
What did you think? Because President Snow says something along the lines of, enjoy your homecoming. What did you expect when Haymitch got home back to District 12?
Something bad. I actually expected something bad. Now, I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. I mean, that was... President Snow is an evil, evil man, but I did expect something to be bad. I didn't know if it was just his brother or like something just his mom, but for both of them in the house fire, my heart was broken.
Well, and the fact that he was like, my mom was so anal about this. Like, they were fire safety experts.
Yes.
Like, this was not an accident.
No.
Ugh.
Well, and for him to have thought at first, as he gets off, first of all, having to wait for the bodies in the caskets to get onto the train for him to be able to even leave. Like, what are we waiting for? Why are we not leaving? We're waiting for your friends. Like, that wording alone made me go, you jerk. And so then when they finally get there, and to me, I envision they're just throwing the caskets on, him off, and then leaving. And then he sees what he thinks is the sunrise, but it's the fire.
Yeah. It felt to me like this was the second time in history that District 12 has had a champion. And so there should have been a welcoming party. There should have been a banner. There should have been something. And instead it's just him and some caskets, and he's walking home in silence. And for something that's this big reality TV thing, you would think that there would still be cameras and that this would be a celebration. But it was the exact opposite. And so running home and realizing that there was nothing he could do to save them, and then they died together, like holding each other, and it was just like... And then you're like, oh, he still has Lenore Dove.
Well, you know.
Oh my goodness.
So I appreciated his ability and strong will to stay back when he wanted to go, like, say something and do something before she was let to go home.
Pause. I want to pause just a second while we're still on the house fire, because it was foreshadowed on page 2.
Yes.
Page 2. I went back to look because his mom asks him to fill the cistern before reaping, and he says, no, I'll do it after reaping because we'll have the time then. And the reason they couldn't put out the fire to save them was that the cistern was empty because his brother hadn't gotten to fill it. And I'm just like, now he's blaming himself for something that was not his fault. It was a fire intentionally set to do this, but now he has a reason to blame himself and add to the level of drama.
I mean, because I know what you said about the bonus episode when you said that he pretty much was a drunk. When I read this book, absolutely he was.
We know why.
I see why. And so I see that he like has this pile on pile of all these people died. I let this happen. I didn't beat them. They won because they knew that all these things would happen. And then I come home, my mother and my brother are dead. My house is gone. Yes, he has this new house that they give him, but who wants to live there? It's a constant reminder that all these things happened.
And then we get out, to Lenore Dove and her getting out of jail and him realizing that she had lied on the phone and that she was still in jail and wasn't going to be released. But again, the blame comes back on him because he's the one that feeds her the gumdrop.
I mean, wow. President Snow, I will say, as evil and vindictive as he is smart.
Right. Creative.
And maybe it's not him. Maybe it's the team behind him, but he is just to use something. He had to have done his research to know that's the one thing that he gives her, and then to use those as her poison.
Well, and they said it at some point that there are eyes everywhere, and along with eyes often come ears. And so the Capitol is always watching and always listening. And so they probably did pull up the cameras from reaping day to see, oh, he bought these gumdrops and asked his brother to give them to his girlfriend. Like, that's all stuff like CCTV that they could figure out. But it's so vindictive and so dirty. And the fact that he realizes it after he feeds it to her. Like, what if he would have eaten the first gumdrop? I don't think he would have because it was a gift for his girlfriend, but still, did Snow want him to die as well?
No, I don't think he did. I think Snow wanted him to be tortured forever, and he wanted him to continue to be the mentor forever. And so I think in Snow's thoughts, he was like, okay, I'm going to make sure he watches his mom and his brother die. I'm going to make sure he watches Lenore Dove be poisoned and die. And so for me, that was just like, just a whole new level of evil.
Well, and you see why he pushes away his best friends and resolves to be isolated. And so that's where we never knew that he was best friends with Katniss's dad. But he ends up shoving them away because everybody close to him dies or is hurt. And so he does that out of love and for his own self-preservation. But that, to me, spoke volumes of Haymitch, and that it was better to just be alone in his own sorrows than to give any leverage to the Capitol or to the president to be able to hurt anybody else on his behalf.
It makes sense. It makes sense in his thinking, right? Like, okay, your best bet is to not be friends with me, or else you're a goner. And so it's easier for me to just look like I'm just pushing you away than for me to explain, because people wouldn't understand. And I think if they were truly his friends, they would probably just be like, it's not true, it's going to be okay. They would try to help him understand that it's not his fault. But it's easier in his mind to just say, go away, I'll pull up the white liquor and try to sulk in my misery.
What did you think about the epilogue?
Oh, man. And that's where he goes to her grave, right? Oh, it was just...
Well, it flashes forward because I think Burdick shows him where the grave is. So I think that's right before the epilogue, maybe not. But he talks about how he met Katniss and that Burdick brought Katniss to the black market, and like he saw her as a little girl, and Burdick was so happy and proud of her. And I was just like, oh, he knew Katniss as a baby and like watched her grow kind of from a distance, because again, he didn't want to get close to anybody, but her little braids reminded him of Luella, and that's why he called her sweetheart. And there's just all these things that tied together. So the fact that you said, or that the impression that I just got was that it was an emotional, a feel-good kind of tying things together. But what
see,
else from there?
I didn't understand, because I haven't read any of the other ones, why that was so significant as to understanding, like, let's see where he brings out Katniss, or, you know, why he's seeing her as a little girl. Like, oh, that's just really sweet and cute. Kind of just real sweet and concise, because I don't have all the history of the other books.
But I feel like the epilogue was, again, that like warm hug of tying it all back together, jumping back to after the trilogy, because they kind of put together this memory book and are trying, and the fact that he's able to finally share his story was huge. Like, that was just a beautiful moment to me. One thing I think we do need to address, because we talked about it in our TLDR episode, one of the reviews that we read talked about there was too much Edgar Allan Poe.
Where did you see Edgar Allan Poe? Where?
Throughout the whole entire thing. There was so much dang Edgar Allan Poe. I agree. I think that was overdone. I skimmed, like, I'm all for poetry.
Oh, yes.
But the Raven quoth too much in this.
Towards the end, when you're like, I'm going to admit, I didn't even read them.
Right. I just skipped over them as well. I was like, I'm sure there's some important tie here, but no, there's a lot.
And I think I kind of like time-lapse that, like, go on to the next. Poetry's not really my thing. And so reading that, I really didn't like even take the impression that it was Edgar Allan Poe, because I didn't even read it. Because it was like, yep, all right, on to the next thing.
I just remember we read that review and we're like, how on earth is this tied into Hunger Games? And so it is fascinating.
It is.
It ties back into the Covey traditions, and that's the name that she got her, that's the song she got her name from. And so the fact that he knows it was kind of a big deal, and traditional, passing along history and memories. But yeah, there was a lot of poetry in there.
It was a lot. I felt like it was several pages to where you were like, wow.
I mean, I think they got through the entire poem.
It's long.
It's a long one.
Yes, I actually...
Like, give me a sonnet next time. 12 lines, call it good. This is ridiculous.
But maybe she felt like she needed to tie that in just to give you that whole understanding of where it came from. It was a lot.
A lot. I don't know. I feel like there could have been a different way to tackle that, but I appreciate it. I mean, it was kind of this remnant history of the United States. I mean, is Edgar Allan Poe an American poet? I'm not even going to go there. I think there's an Edgar Allan Poe bench in Boston or something like that, so maybe. Maybe I'm a dummy and shouldn't be talking about this on the record.
Maybe I should have listened more in language arts. If my teacher's listening, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Right. One other thing that I actually asked this question to myself while reading, and it came up on one of the documents that I Googled. And so I want to ask if this stood out to you, because the question I wrote down in my notes was, did we eliminate AI? So, like, AI, artificial intelligence, is a really big deal right now, and it's helping us do everything. It's helping us do this podcast. Like, it's helping us do a lot in the world.
Yeah.
But Plutarch says that there are tools for editing that were abolished and incapacitated in the past, ones deemed fated to destroy humanity because of their ability to replicate any scenario using any person.
That sounds like AI.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that just made me think, like, does it get to a point where it's too much and we realize that we need to just stop?
In reality, if you think of it, eventually computers are going to fail us, right? Not that humans won't, but some things need humans to actually initiate them and to make them active, right? And to make them good. Mm-hmm. And so I could see where AI can be troublesome. I can see where it be harmful, but it must have, because this is what futuristic, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that has to be what he's talking about.
Right. He said that, and I was just like, oh, snap. I can see. I mean, we have a lot of issues with it in society right now, and people doing deep fakes and all of this stuff that is very questionable. Do we get to the point where we just say no?
Well, there is a point sometimes when you're watching things that you're like, is that really the person doing it? Or is it now AI that created this? And so I know it says, like, you need to mention if it's AI or not, but not everyone does. And so it can be scary.
Well, and when we look at all the different ways that they edited this storyline for their TV show, like, that could very well be the technology, and it's very shady, all of it. So I just thought that was a good little morsel to think about. Like, what is the draw here? Where is the line? Do we say it's good for medical advances and not for this? And, like, I thought there was a lot to consider there.
Maybe control.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to control when there's technology advances taking over a lot of the things.
Okay. We've been talking for quite a while. Do we want to do our ratings?
Yeah. I want to hear yours first.
Okay. Well, mine is a 5 because that is my life. And there were things. I mean, we talked about the poetry and how that was a little much. There may have been a couple things to change, but I will just be the generic fan of, like, this was the warm hug that I needed. I think the other review that we said, it was like walking into a chainsaw, and that I knew what was coming, but she was still able to really surprise me. I mean, my list of surprises kept going and kept going and kept going right up until the very end. So even though we thought we kind of knew what to expect, she blew me away.
Okay, I do want to know, in all of the books, see, and I don't have this rating, but this is just for you. In all of the books, where would you place it?
Of the Hunger Games. I'm not that kind of person. I can't do that. I'm a vibes person. That book made me happy. That book made me happy. I don't know. This one I did really enjoy. And didn't we read some? Well, I mean, the fact that this one was the best selling out of the Hunger Games series does speak volumes. I don't know that it's my favorite, but I did really enjoy it. I mean, I think the first book is still going to be my first love.
Makes sense. It's introduced you to all of them.
Yeah. So this one could probably be number 2. I'll say that.
All right. Now you're excited to hear my review.
I am.
Well, so this is way outside YA. Again, I've only read The Twilight. Like, that's the only YA series, and it didn't pull me enough to make me read others. So I will just say, like, the fact that you pulled me into reading it, I will say, I want to read some more of it. It was really interesting. Oh, no.
She's giving us a number.
So out of 5, I got to say it was a 4.8.
Wow, Sarah.
It was really great from the beginning to the end, to where I literally was angry, and at the end I got teary-eyed. And so I was like, I saw every emotion in that book. I could see why it is so captivating, so intriguing. It was like a roller coaster of love, hate, anger, happiness, sadness,
disgust.
Yes.
All of it.
And I loved it. It was great. It was a great recommendation. I never thought I'd ever read any of these books, but it was so good that I actually want to go watch the movie.
I think we're going to have to schedule a date, and we're just going to do a movie marathon and get it out of your system.
Yeah, I really was like, this is so interesting. Like, there's so much to it.
So in your view, I mean, comparing young adult fiction to adult fiction, I think we kind of talked about this, but it is a very mature topic, and these kids are being thrown into something that is very adult. So do you think that kind of played a role, whereas like Twilight was high schoolers? I don't know.
I guess what I think was so interesting about young adult versus adult fiction, I feel like she did such a good job. And again, her writing was great. She did such a good job at pulling you in and captivating you, because I think about teens, right? I think about us, we are like not necessarily into books, we're out of books, we're into books, out of books, but they've got to be really interested to not say, this is a DNF, I'm not going to finish this, let me finish this all the way through. So you really have to push and to be captivating. So I felt that it was really well written. I'm scared for my daughter to want to read this because they're killing each other. But I think that the moral of the story, the heartfelt understanding that it isn't real, it's not really going to happen, I think it's a great book.
Well, and that was the review of my 11-year-old when he read Hunger Games. He couldn't put it down. I mean, that still means he read it in the span of like 3 months. I couldn't put it down.
But hey, for them, 3 months is a long time.
It was unlike anything else he had ever read. And it was so captivating. So as an 11-year-old, again, as a parent, I recommend you read it first and gauge your child's maturity level and whether they can handle that. But yeah.
But I think as a parent, having had read it, if my daughter were to go read it, now she's only 8, almost 9, not anytime soon. But when she would go, I would want to read it almost together. So we talk about it together. So she understands kind of the figment and the fiction part of it, of like, this is not real, but understand what the moral of and the understanding what we can pull away from this. So it was good. I was really impressed.
I'm so proud of you.
Well, and happy birthday. I'm glad I obliged. So
I'm hoping that some of our listeners are kind of in this boat too, where they may have been hesitant to try it and then realized, hey, there is a lot of hype for a good reason.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm looking for feedback from people. And maybe you just are listening because you decided you weren't going to read it and don't care, but maybe Sarah's been able to persuade you throughout this.
And mind you, this is not my norm. And so it has really pulled me outside my comfort zone, which is so good. It's really great. And that's why we want to get other recommendations, because we never know what we don't know.
That's so true. I love pushing each other to read more. So one of these days, we're going to get you into historical fiction.
Ooh, I'm ready.
All right, keep reading.
Keep ranting.
And remember, you are so approachable.
Okay, the episode is over. If you enjoyed it, could you give us a thumbs up or leave a review?
It goes a long way toward helping us grow and meet new people like you.
Subscribe to get notified when the next episode drops.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook to see what we're reading next, recommend new books, and join the conversation.
We're so excited to have you on board.